Hey everybody, Zach here, back again for the first time with another message from LETR-Z. That's lies exposed, truth revealed in the last days. Because the Elohim that we serve is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first to the last, the Aleph and the Ta, the A to the Z. And we are living in the Z. All glory to the Most High. We're going to be jumping back in here in I Want My Kids to Know Who God Really Is by Barb Cantrell. And we're going to be doing Chapter 2, Love the Law. If you haven't checked out Chapter 1 or the intro, please go do so. Like, subscribe, share if the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit does direct you to do so. I appreciate you. Love the Law. King David said, "Write the law on my heart." Yahuwah was well pleased with Yeshua, but he loved David. David was the young child that fenced off the lion and wolf to save the family's flock of sheep. David was 5'4" tall at adult age, but slayed Goliath at fully 9 foot tall with merely a stone cast from his slingshot. David would not slay King Saul, his king, his father-in-law, the anointed of Yahuwah, and put to death the man that boasted his hand had slayed the king. His son, on the other hand, had no trouble trying to kill Dad, his king, and the anointed of Yahuwah. Virtue does not run in the family. It is not a gene, it is a choice. As a man thinketh, he liveth. David chose to be virtuous, and he chose to serve Yahuwah well with plans for a temple and altar and harmonious singing, reverence of Yahuwah, jubilant dancing, and fearless fighting. David had the mighty men, and they were amazing. Each man probably had a shield bearer to count the kills, but these guys were a force to be reckoned with, one tallying up 300 kills in a single battle and routinely showing deadly force. David was on the run from King Saul, who had an evil spirit nagging him and headache only David could relieve. Sounds rather mystical, doesn't it? David's men were loyal to a fault, and a couple of them broke through enemy lines of thousands to bring David a cup of water from the enemy-held well. David put a good man, not a mighty man, over them. He was not a mighty man, but a good man, and he became captain of the guard. He got his distinction from being the only soldier not to flee in fear, and he faced an army of 300 by himself. I suspect they were sporting sorts for this to happen, but maybe they were stupid and stood so close that they couldn't swing a sword, and he lopped 5 heads a pass. In the end, the rest came back and took the spoils. Honor in battle is seldom seen now, even military men disliking video game combat and remote killing. Worse are the medical community discoveries that are being used here and abroad to sterilize people and leave them with no children and the knowledge that their country is gone in a generation or two. I love the story about Samuel, who wielded Yahuwah's power one day against the enemy that had the fortress under siege. Samuel blinded the enemies and then cheerily walked them 24 miles or so to their worst enemy. That king asked Samuel what he was supposed to do with them, and Samuel said to give them a little bread and water and send them on their way. The king gave a feast. Men are a lot smaller today in their mindset. There is little honor. Reading the Bible stories will make you see that absence in people today. In the old days, these stories were kept alive around a campfire, and listening to these stories would affect the listener far deeper than a picture. We get all the blood and gore we need on TV, but it doesn't change who we are. like hearing about valor from a man that respects another man's valor. These people were related to, and so family heritage and pride would lock in that feeling that I will be brave someday too. David was far from perfect. He committed adultery with the wife of a very devoted soldier and then covered the crime by causing his death in battle. He submitted to Yahuwah and threw himself down on his face when in error. He had gotten wise unto himself, thinking Yahuwah would be satisfied with him in the dirt. This routine came easily, but Yahuwah then tripped him up with a personal command, and then he sent an evil spirit to cause him to fail. Therefore, his sin became an accountable sin, and David could not withstand the pressure from the demon to sin. David did a census. After sinning before Yahuwah, an angel of death killed a couple thousand subjects. David stopped the angel when he brought a vineyard and set up an altar to Yahuwah. He made sure it was his money as it was his crime. Yahuwah loved David because he Yahuwah loved David because he could take punishment well and because he did everything the best that he could. When David asked to marry Saul's daughter, Michal, Michal, he wasn't actually wanted. He was required to bring 100 foreskins for her hand. David did nothing in half measures, so he went to Philistine giants and got 100 of the biggest foreskins he could find. Yahuwah loved his feisty nature. David had highs and lows, but his greatest sadness was the death of his beloved son, Absalom, who didn't care a bit about him. David's family life was far from a loving home. His wives were many, and the family tree had its share of generational curses. Solomon became king, but he bemoaned the fact that he had nothing to do. There was no work of his hands because David had planned everything down to the last detail on the temple. Solomon pleased Yahuwah by asking for wisdom, but his boredom and detachment from the temple work itself caused him to marry over 700 wives. Because he was determined to be a great husband, he built altars to foreign gods for one of his wives, and the kingdom was lost for transgression from the one true Yahuwah, the one true Elohim. There is a way to write the law upon your heart. Simply repeating the 10 Commandments 10 times will lock it into your memory. Learning a foreign language works that way too, and the younger you are, the better. Language absorption slows after age 12. The remembrance of the law is called a precept, and when you are an adult, at 20 years old, the precepts will become concepts as you connect them to your life and community. Law is not oppression, it is freedom, or at least Yahuwah's law is. We all can live freely with his perfect law. They use rule of law here to justify upholding oppressive and unconstitutional laws. This is like voting an immoral act in his law and then saying it is moral because it is law. The perversion is in the law, but the perversion is in those voting it into law as well, and they will have to answer for it later. Those that do perverse things in government will have no place in heaven, but will burn in the everlasting sea of fire. That is where the perverse end up. Yeshua, or Yahusha, would say that they had their reward on earth. Yahuwah says, "Governors, be ye just." We have a responsibility to Yahuwah to honor his laws. We have a duty to our country to honor our country's laws. We are fortunate that we live in the United States, but there is a duty with that, and the founding fathers did much work to ensure that we could be self-governing and get rid of bad government if needed. The problem is knowing which is which. Many would like to overthrow the hard work of those that wrote the Constitution and force oppressive socialistic or communistic regimes upon us. Communism and socialism ruin the economies and eventually collapse a country, leaving the citizens worse than before. Some people just want to run everything. It is an unhealthy mindset and it never serves the public. They use ruses like climate control when that is Yahuwah's job. They use ruses like disease, and Yahuwah says, "Be not alarmed." There isn't a virus or bacteria he can't whip. People will be killed by them, and Yeshua simply says they can kill your body, and then he says your troubles will be over. Yeshua identifies several of these problem children in the New Testament. It is odd that with all the mention of them, most Christians haven't got a clue about what they are up to now. Sadly, Yeshua plainly stated, "I would not have you ignorant." The Pharisees were one such group, and they now call themselves Nova Techers. I should have looked that up from the last one. I still don't know what that means. I meant to look it up. I'm sorry. Novu Techers, Nouveau space Techers. Latin or French, I'm not sure. Techers is probably teachers. I don't know. I don't know. They probably think they're noble teachers. That's what I assume from that. I don't know. I'm going to have to look that up. I have an ugly name more fitting for them because I am not a respecter of their persons. They were called sons of vipers by John the Baptist. The other group was the Sadducees. That is the medical symbol of the snake on the stick. They were rescued from Egypt, I think, and hated Yahuwah for the wandering in the desert and have given their Hippocratic oath to Apollyon the devil, and Asclepius, and Hyperion, and all other lowercase gods. They had their chance, and they mutilate bodies and law and defy Yahuwah at every turn by not allowing the herbs of the field to be used in medicine here for decades. Their modern medicine harms more than heals, and transfusing blood is an abomination to Yahuwah. Blood transfusions are not Yahuwah's idea of help. Therefore, those with an oath to Apollyon do it to defy Yahuwah. Removing the Bible from schools to teach organ transplant science is defiance and an abomination to Yahuwah. Other lesser-known tidbits are that Yahuwah knew of hantavirus 5,000 years ago, and we just figured that one out about 20 years ago. I have personally experienced a cleansing at the very moment of sunset. Yahuwah calls sunset even. I think many viruses and bacteria are eliminated, perhaps with a sound that happens at even. Touching blood was forbidden and had certain rules attached to it. Women were kept away from others when menstruating, and those that contacted blood were to stay away from others for 3 days, I think. The Apostle Paul says to cleave to prophecy. This means every church should be well versed in Bible prophecy and also be aware of those that may rise up in their own church. There is a special set of circumstances that removes much of the concern about false prophets. The prophets rise in threes as children. I experienced this as a child at Bible camp. I have to say this. I grumbled about everything church, but I thank my parents today. Yeshua said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." Prophets rise together. One speaks in tongues that is a foreign or ancient language. One interprets the foreign language, and the third determines who the prophecy is about. Sadly, many church pastors and ministers fear this element in a church. This is where the healers come from. This is where your safety is. The power of angels is in these youth, and the Apostle Paul said if he had it to do again, he would keep his virgin. He would be celibate for the greater good. The Foxfire books brought more enlightenment to me than any church. The gifts are not lost in virginal marriage, but losing the virginity before marriage is a win for Satan. Something I learned there was the gifts are lost by teaching to the same sex, which makes sense. Yahuwah would not have one gender empowered and one not, yet there is an element of man love out there. There were times in the past that men honored a law that considered the women well enough that they were entrusted by their community to be boss. As you watch the honor system crumble in the Old Testament, it pretty much ends with Tamara having to play the whore to have a child, and the father would have killed her and she not deceived him personally. He states that she was righter than he was in the matter. King James Version made it easy for the whole man love thing to take off. Sadly, some will thump the Bible and uphold King James lies. I guess that was the first case of transparency. To avoid the pitfalls of modern interpretation, I recommend reading each story with an eye to figuring out what each person had to give up in order to do as Yahuwah asked them. Each and every one of them gave up something or paid dearly for not giving it up. We are all challenged, but Yahuwah never asks more of you than you can handle. This world is a hard climate. We are told to grow up and then told we aren't old enough or mature enough, and then we are berated if we fill our time wrongly while we are too young or irresponsible to do what they now demand we do, even if it's not our time. This is why Yahuwah says you are an adult at age 20. In Yahuwah's face, government wants the best for their kids and cares little for other people's kids, so a poor black kid gets life at 14 while senators' kids have taxpayers pay their insurance at age 28. To frustrate people further, one can vote and die in war at 18 but cannot drink until 21. Some of this makes insurance companies a lot of money, and some save government workers a lot of money, and it ends up being unfair. Age 20 is adult, period. You should leave the things of childhood behind as an adult. Do video games on the Sabbath, Saturday, not Sunday, and pack up the dolls and put them in the attic. It is time to be out there in the community helping elderly people or children or raising your own family. Stay married. Think well about the marriage vow, forsaking all others, holding on until natural death. There will be more decisions forced upon you as the battle for supremacy grows. We are in this battle right now, and sadly, many Christians think all they have to do is say Jesus' name and it will all be better. We are given a command to drive and tunnel builders into their clever little tunnels. Master builders in stone, they built castles and pyramids and secret tunnels and secret societies that had little regard for others. Our school system was well laid out with a school section and a schoolhouse for every 8 sections, I think. A section is 160 acres. The tunnel builders closed the rural schools in my youth and then drove almost 200 kids out of the school so they could focus on educating their children. They have dumbed down education and removed the apprentice, journeyman, and master craftsman training that was accepted and brought excellent tradesmen to every community. They will provide only basic English eventually, 850 words and basic grammar, and that will make it easier for Mexicans to move in on us, and they will be bilingual, have more job options, and their unskilled labor will work cheaper. The sin involved is coveting American taxpayers' monies, using it only to benefit their children. Many of these adults work in government and make 20% more than the comparable jobs in the industrial sector. They are not serving well. So much is flying around your family now, distracting parents and depriving kids of quality parental time. It is especially hard for young adults that head into the world with hope only to find it is so hard to manage things. The Most High calls this a yoke ye cannot bear. That is why it is so important to pick up His cross, because His yoke is light. By doing that little thing, He asks, you help yourself and you help others too. The tunnel builders will use laws passed in Canada to justify actions here. There was, if I remember right, a school teacher that promoted same-sex intercourse and that it should be legal from the age 14 up. To me, it is one thing if a couple kids diddle around, but quite another for adults to take children. Even in prisons, these people are considered scum. The other reason is that school teachers are a position of trust. That would have to mean complete neutrality where these issues are concerned and emotions rule out neutrality. Also, ask yourself this. What if my teacher didn't like my essay and said, I will pass you if you consent? This is why we must keep age differences held firmly. Now, Canada is promoting sex change legislation for any child that so desires and with no consideration for the parents. In another case of violations in positions of trust, the community health partners put a flesh-eating bacteria into women's vaginas to cause sterility, making $800 a person at the emergency room to treat this pathogen and to fake menopause in older women. Faking the menopause was to remove concerns about naturally produced hormonal balance so they could remove the uterus and all with faked cervical cancer. Then, with the Planned Parenthood HPV epidemic that they put into women's vaginas, we have a cancer lesions spreading virus pattern out there. There needs to be trust in those positions of trust. Breast cancer was faked by putting magnets on the nipples during a mammogram. If any teacher wants to have intercourse legally with your child, how do you avoid sexual harassment at school? Wouldn't the children prefer to be at a bar seeking their own idea of sexual partner rather than being approached by a teacher? Why should the children be the target of satisfaction when the teacher can go to a bar? Relations in the workplace are bad enough, but how do awkward kids deal with sexual embarrassments in school, and how many unalivings will follow? Personal unalivings. How many children will regret the organ change later? Where is the parents' peace of mind? Will rule of law make it law here because some backwoods mentality makes it law in Canada? Can the school bus driver have sex with the last kid on the bus and call it a date? Then there is a free-range kid laws, and these have to do with children at large being turned into organ donors. It is not safe. I am not just trying to scare you. It is not safe out there, and it is getting worse. The Mexican immigration influx will also be used to supply organs. Yahuwah would have you keep your feet still on this matter and call the touching or transfusion of blood an abomination, and organ transplanting also an abomination. Call it what Yahuwah wants you to call it. The Bible was pulled out of the schools for religious freedom, and it frees the devil worshippers, those with an oath to Apollyon to spread their plan of money-making as science, and duty and love. It is not freedom if you owe someone your organs or they take them before you are done with them. The Nova Tech antisocial society has usurped our insurance proceeds. By this, I mean we have insurance for retirement called Social Security insurance benefits, and they now act like everyone must serve them to get their dream vacation. We already paid for our dream vacation, but they want control. They seem to randomly hand out religions, like this one is Buddhist, that one is some cosmic admirer. The method is to say there are this many Buddhists, devil worshippers, and these few Christians, so we will provide these services according to the numbers. You have stepped into this at a spectacular moment. Expect the fight to heat up. Social Security may shut off, but there is hope that a new system based on donated marijuana can reboot the system that was drained by term limiters and stolen funds redirected to the space program. Those funds could have been recovered, but Congress, Senate, and the President voted to give the UFO technology away, no charge. They left us unable to defend against the weapons and crafts reverse engineered from all those years of study. Now they offer 4 citizens a lift in space. How generous of them. And did they let the weather-changing people killing scientists and population control fanatics see their damage from space too? By watering down the faithful numbers, they can say 70% are for this measure. The problem is they don't actually tell you what the big plan is. The First Responders Act was supposed to mean better care after an incident, that is life-giving care known by many. It amounts to keeping organs viable now. They get a 10% commission on the sale of organs, and they use this money to buy spyware and weapons to use against even the innocent. The proceeds helped build many new facilities and buy much equipment, but they want funds flowing to the point of murder. Black market organ selling is through the first responders. We are worth more dead than alive to the medical and law enforcement communities. The 9/11 was a turning point in history. The FBI diligently learned of an attack and was told to do nothing to prevent the attack upon the United States citizens. Those 3,000 deaths were completely preventable, and it became an inside job when our government did not protect us but allowed the massacre. These same wretched people then voted to retire and take our retirement funds so to not bankrupt their separate retirement benefits. These 650 people should have prevented this, and if failing there, personally reported it to press and public to the point of clearing the buildings. They are paid to do these things that protect the public, and that failure was treason. They call those treasonous acts rule of law. That ends chapter 2. Wanted to take a moment and address in the last chapter, she had mentioned, different religious groups, one of which was Scientology, and I call that as an outright cult. I 100% believe that. I've done a lot of studies on that. I've, seen people who have come out of it and they've exposed it. But yeah, the Dianetics, I looked into that briefly. I didn't do a deep dive into it. However, it's a pseudoscience, mapping the human brain essentially, created by L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard is the one who created Scientology. He was a science fiction writer and just came up with a religion. And he was also really good buddies with Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was a engineer, worked at NASA. NASA is chock full of Nazis. Project Paperclip. NASA, the word NASA means deception in Hebrew. You can look that up in the Strong's Concordance. That little, red swoop that they have coming through the NASA logo. That's just a serpent's tongue. It's literally a serpent's tongue. But yeah, Jack Parsons was directly involved with Thelema, which means will by Hebrew, but it's the religion of Thelema is effectively the satanic religion created by Crowley, Aleister Crowley, and he dubbed himself the beast and the most wicked man to ever exist. He said, he loves that, Christians will celebrate the devil at least once a year on Halloween. He said that the greatest, sacrifice is a small boy, a small child, male. So L. Ron Hubbard was directly involved with all these people, and it's just bad. But the UFO technology that was here just mentioned, those are just demons. They're going to be using that Project Bluebeam. Don't be fooled by it. They're going to be broadcasting images of the Jesus in the sky. And it's going to look exactly like the depiction of the Catholic Jesus that they have hanging on the cross. The one that is a blasphemous and graven image that the second commandment says, make none of. And there is a member of the Rothschilds, I believe it's the Rothschilds. Yeah. I forget his name, but there's a member of that family that looks exactly like the image of, what they call Jesus Christ, which Jesus Christ is JC, Julius Caesar. It's all a corruption to lead millions upon millions astray. The fake alien invasion, they're going to be, Project Bluebeam, sucking people up into the air. It's going to appear that way. People are going to be disappearing. There's speculation that that's going to actually be dimensional hopping. CERN was, they opened up a portal to hell back in, I think, 2006. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong on the year, but I think it was 2006. And that's where we get the Mandela effect from. It's because dimensions are merging. Yeah. It's going to be fun. That's why I always say, Hosea 4:6 says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So if you're not paying attention, if you're not aware of what they're doing, you will be deceived. He is a deceiver. He comes as an angel of light. That's what the Illuminati is. That's what Lucifer is. Luxfer means light bringer. And They will deceive millions. You know, many be on the path for destruction. Narrow is the way to salvation. That's why I always say Yeshua or Yahusha, because it means, you know, Yah is salvation, or Yah is my cry for help. You know, there is but one way. He is the truth. He is the life. He is the way, and none shall come to the Father less through him. So please stay prayed up. Stay in your word. Don't just read it, but live it. Because there are so many, you know, quote unquote Christians out there that claim the title, they wear a cross, you know, and so many things that are, it's just blasphemy. It's the great apostasy. Many are falling away. This is the time. This is truly the time. No one knows the day or the hour in which the Father will come back, except the Father, not the angels, not even the Son. No one but the Father knows. But stay in your word. Stay aware. Stay vigilant. Stay sober. Bless you. Love you. See you in the next video. Bye.